You wake up, cannot move, and feel someone standing beside the bed. Not because your eyes are broken, but because part of your brain is still dreaming. That sentence might describe last Tuesday for you, or it might describe something that happened once and never quite left you. Either way, what you experienced was not a ghost, not a demon crawling from the walls, and not evidence that your mind is breaking. It was your own nervous system caught between two states, and the terror it produced was, in a strange way, proof of how brilliantly your brain is trying to protect you. But here is the question that researchers are still wrestling with. Why does that protection take the shape of a person? Why not a sound, or a color, or nothing at all? Hold that question, because the answer is stranger than the monster itself. First, let us be precise about what actually happens. Sleep paralysis is a brief inability to move at sleep onset or awakening while consciousness is preserved. You are awake, genuinely, measurably awake. But your body will not cooperate. You cannot lift an arm, you cannot turn your head. In many cases, you cannot even call out. And that silence is part of what makes the experience feel so catastrophic. The paralysis is not damage. It is a normal feature of sleep that has simply outlasted its welcome by a few seconds, or, in some cases, a few excruciating minutes. To understand why, you need to understand what your brain is doing every night when it sends you into REM sleep, the phase where most vivid dreaming occurs. During REM, your brain becomes almost feverishly active. It runs narratives, generates faces, simulates emotions, rehearses fears. At the same time, it does something very deliberate with your body. It switches off your voluntary muscles. Not by accident, but by design. This REM-related muscle atonia is a safety mechanism. Without it, you would physically act out every dream.
You would throw punches, sprint across the room, fall downstairs. The atonia keeps you still, so that the theater in your head stays in your head. It is one of the more elegant solutions in human biology. The problem begins at the border. As you drift toward waking, the transition is supposed to happen in a particular order. Muscle control returns, then conscious awareness follows. Sleep paralysis occurs when that sequence reverses or stalls. Awareness comes back first. You are conscious, you are thinking, you know where you are. And the atonia is still running. The muscle off switch has not yet received the memo that the dream is over. That mismatch, that gap between a mind that knows it is awake and a body that is behaving as though it is dreaming, is the engine of the entire experience. Now imagine this from the inside. You open your eyes, or at least you believe you do, and the room looks familiar. Your ceiling, your window, the shape of your furniture. But when you try to move, nothing happens. You try again, nothing. You try to call out to whoever is in the next room, your partner, a roommate, anyone, and your mouth will not form the word. Your chest feels heavy, as though something is pressing down. And then, at the edge of your vision, or just behind you, where you cannot turn to look, there is a shape. Human in outline, still, watching. The fear that floods through you in that moment is not irrational. It is the oldest alarm your nervous system knows. Something is here, and I cannot run. That particular terror, the intruder, the watcher, the presence, is one of three clusters of hallucination that researchers have identified in sleep paralysis. The first is the intruder experience, the overwhelming sense that another person or entity has entered the space, sometimes accompanied by sounds like footsteps or breathing, sometimes only a feeling of being observed. The second is the incubus experience, physical pressure on the chest or body, often interpreted as something sitting on or pinning the person down, which can make breathing feel difficult, even though breathing itself is not actually compromised during an episode. The third involves vestibular and motor sensations,
feelings of floating, spinning, or being pulled out of the body, which researchers think may arise from the brain's own confusion about where the physical self ends and the dreaming self begins.
These three types can occur separately or together, and when they arrive simultaneously, the result is one of the most comprehensively terrifying experiences a human being can have while lying in their own bed. But why does the brain so reliably construct a human presence rather than, say, a color or a tone? This is where the science becomes genuinely fascinating and genuinely uncertain. One possibility is that your threat detection machinery, the systems that evolved to keep you alive in environments where other humans could mean danger, remains active and hypervigilant during the atonia state. When those systems fire without a clear external cause, they may default to the most statistically significant threat in human evolutionary history, another person with uncertain intentions. The brain, in other words, may not be generating a random hallucination. It may be running its most important survival subroutine and producing the output that subroutine has always produced: a stranger in the dark. What is striking is how that stranger changes its costume depending on where you were born. In West African and Caribbean traditions, the figure is often described as a witch or a spirit sitting on the chest. In Newfoundland folklore, it is the old hag pressing down in the night. In Japanese tradition, the experience maps onto a spirit called kanashibari. In parts of the southern United States, the same phenomenon has been described as a witch riding your back. The details differ enormously. The underlying architecture does not. Paralysis, presence, pressure, fear. Those four elements repeat across centuries and continents. What culture provides is the narrative that makes the experience intelligible. It gives the shadow a name, a motive, a mythology. It does not change what the nervous system is doing. It only changes what the person calls it when they wake up shaking in the morning and try to explain it to someone else. That consistency across cultures is actually one of the strongest arguments that sleep paralysis is a neurological phenomenon and not a supernatural one. Not because the supernatural is automatically impossible to imagine, but because no supernatural explanation would be expected to follow the precise biological parameters that sleep paralysis follows. Occurring at the boundary of REM sleep, resolving when the atonia resolves, correlating with sleep deprivation and disrupted schedules, repeating under predictable conditions and reducing when sleep is stabilized. Which brings us to triggers. Disrupted or irregular sleep is among the most commonly reported factors associated with increased episodes. Sleeping on your back appears to be associated with higher frequency in some people, possibly because of how it affects breathing and muscle relaxation. Significant stress, jet lag, and schedules that fight the body's natural rhythms are all factors that researchers have noted in connection with recurrence. Again, none of this is diagnosis, and none of it is a prescription. The experience exists on a wide spectrum. Many people have 1 or 2 episodes in a lifetime and nothing more. For others, the episodes are frequent and genuinely distressing, disrupting sleep, generating anxiety about going to bed, and in some cases, feeding into broader patterns of sleep difficulty. For anyone in that situation, the most useful thing is not a folklore remedy or a late-night internet spiral. It is a conversation with a medical professional who can look at the full picture. The instinct to search for meaning in the experience is understandable. When your body betrays you in the dark, and your mind generates a presence that feels as real as anything you have ever perceived, the idea that something external caused it is almost comforting. A demon has a face. A neurological border state is just a process. But here is what the science actually offers. And it is more interesting than the demon. Your brain, even in its most frightened and disoriented state, is doing something coherent. It is applying its best model of danger. It is generating the most plausible explanation for the signals it is receiving. It is trying, in the only way it knows, to get you out of a situation it perceives as threatening.
The monster is not evidence of something outside you. It is evidence of something inside you that has been keeping your ancestors alive for a very long time. So back to the opening question. Why does the protection take the shape of a person?
The most honest answer available is that the human brain appears to have a deep, persistent bias towards social and interpersonal threat. And when the systems that detect that threat are running without clean input from the senses, a human shape is what they reach for. The exact mechanism, the precise circuits, the precise sequence, remains partly hypothetical. Researchers are still mapping it, but the broad outline is clear enough. The monster is the alarm, and the alarm is yours.
What is remarkable is that this same brain, the one that just spent 30 seconds convincing you there was a killer in your bedroom, will within minutes be making you coffee and planning your afternoon. That gap between the dreaming mind and the waking mind, between the body still asleep and the awareness already arrived, turns out to be one of the most revealing windows we have into how consciousness actually assembles itself each morning. And if that transition between sleep and waking can produce a fully convincing phantom from nothing but biology, you have to wonder what else happens in those few seconds before you are entirely yourself again. Which is exactly what we are going to look at next.